Bayonetta 3 has set itself apart from its predecessors, and it's obvious there was a clear desire from Platinum Games to do so. But how much can you change a series in just one entry without it feeling like a different franchise? How do you avoid that risk of losing the magic and unique satisfaction that incentivizes you to play Bayonetta rather than any other video game? Let's discuss. One thing that's been unique to the Bayonetta series is its overly positive tone. Even in a world where tragedy has struck, enemies are gruesome, and odds are stacked against us. Something that captures fans' hearts was just bearing witness to Bayonetta overcome these odds confidently, and even allowing us to partake in that triumph by controlling her throughout the game. What other franchise has you fighting an enemy like this, while listening to music like this? None. That's how many. It's just Bayonetta. So when Bayonetta 3 comes along and sets the groundwork for what seems like an interesting story plus that immensely unique tone, it's no secret that we were all disappointed with the actual direction the story took. Now, we can sit here and debate all day about whether or not all the universes got revived in the end, or if Brave Cereza is actually being tortured in hell or not, but at the end of the day, it shouldn't have even gotten to this point in the first place. The story, along the way, should have never taken the contrived turns it did. Let's compare what actually happened in the story versus what should have happened. In the Bayonetta 3 that we got, the story goes for a hopeless stance on a world-ending event. The homunculi threat is clearly an allegory for natural disasters, such as climate change and disease, if the iridescent tsunami and infectious bugs are anything to go by. An inevitable end and inevitable death to everything and everyone we know and love, from what's basically a force of nature. That's the story, and it's set up rather well actually. We're even forced to play a segment where a Bayonetta variant can hardly move in her final moments before dying. This was the perfect intro because it raises the question of how is our Bayonetta variant going to overcome this existential threat. From here, the homunculi are infesting the multiverse. Universes are being wiped out almost simultaneously. Only a few worlds remain. Playing as a grown-up version of Little Cereza from Bayo 1, we go to each universe and obtain a Chaos Gear. And every time we do, we witness their Bayonetta get murdered in ways that never make sense. From heavily telegraphed attacks and contrived circumstances, the universe falls apart as a consequence. Sure, whatever, I guess. We rinse and repeat this about 4 times. Yeah, the game actually presents as a gore fest of watching Bayonetta die over and over. Then the game tells us we just wasted our time playing it because the main antagonist, Singularity, is the doctor that we saved in the John segments, and he uses the gears we gathered in the Bayo segments to trap us in his home dimension. So far, this presents as a story that's trying to tell us everything we do is meaningless, and in fact, anything we do will only speed up the end. While we're stuck in the Alphaverse, Sigurd uses the opportunity to somehow stab Jean with a very, very, very telegraphed attack, and it's fatal. Okay, sure, whatever. He literally just spent 5 seconds explaining that he was about to stab her, but whatever. Eventually, Cereza tracks down Singularity and revives all of the fallen Bayos and Jeans by attacking his literal black hole of a body. They wallop his ass, but not for long, because apparently 100 Bayonettas converging on one reality isn't enough. Yeah, 100 Godslayer variants. Okay, whatever. So Brave Cereza goes through the same scenario Viola's Bayonetta went through. The revived Bayonetta 1 and 2 show up to help beat Singularity, but it's still pointless because they peace out before finishing the job. Sure, okay, whatever. Then Luca joins in and yeah, he's the one who helps turn the tide of battle apparently. Okay, whatever, again, I guess. Bayonetta loses all her IQ and summons Gamora instead of Madama Butterfly with the last of her power to deal a finishing blow, with a standard move that we've been using all game to fight homunculi minions. And she dies from losing control of Gamora because she has no energy left. Okay, Whatever. The point is, notice how many times I have to shrug off major plot points with an okay, whatever. That's the biggest issue with the tone shift here. Cereza has proven to be more powerful than gods and has overcome any obstacle she's ever faced handily. This means the Bayonetta series is not the franchise to propose a nihilistic story and have everything fall apart. The developers should have realized that and gotten creative instead of making a story you can find in any other video game. Like Astral Chain, for example. Except in Astral Chain, a hopeless tone made sense because that world doesn't have Bayonetta. It has cops. And we all know how good cops are at their jobs.
This work for you? I can't seem to find my license, but...
You have a good day, sir.
Instead, what we're left with is characters we know to be smarter acting dumb for the sake of the plot. Contrived deaths and plot twists that a 9-year-old can see coming. Sigurd was obviously Singularity, yet Platinum Games swears Bayonetta, a 600-year-old witch known for outwitting the player and staying one step ahead of every scenario in front of her, didn't even have the slightest suspicion? I get that she subconsciously wants to trust Viola because she knows deep down she's her daughter, but we've also seen that she recognizes Viola as mentally and physically inferior, which makes both Jean and Brave Cereza's deaths contrived. You cannot believably dumb down these characters for the sake of the plot. Even worse is that, as it stands, Viola is twice responsible for Cereza's death. Once for her faulty direction in saving and trusting Sigurd, and the second for becoming a burden in the final fight cause, well, she somehow forgot to activate her fairy powers that we, the player, have been activating all game. Not a good precedent for a character they're trying to shove down our throats as the new Bayonetta. I'll repeat, the Bayonetta series is not the place to have a negatively nihilistic story. No, the Bayonetta series would have been the perfect medium to provide solutions to existential issues, to send a positive message about what we can do right now to stop global catastrophes. Was it okay to have a story where Bayonetta is powerless alone? Yes, absolutely. But was it okay to have one of the smartest and most capable video game characters ever created fall for every obvious plot twist? To never figure out that the true solution to the threat was clearly teamwork? No, absolutely not. There was a way to write this story and have the same themes while maintaining the essence of the series. Here's what should have happened. As you know, Singularity talks Bayonetta the entire game. He basically tells us, you can't do that. In Bayonetta 1 and 2, the message was always, yes, I can. In Bayonetta 3, Brave Cereza more than anyone should be saying, yes, I can, but the way she goes about solving this problem is admitting that she cannot do it alone. So she goes into each timeline and works together with her variants to overcome the destruction of their universes. She would interact and have actual conversations with them, because otherwise, what's even the point of a multiverse? Since Brave Cereza is the only one who can perform the Deadly Sin ritual, her variants could fend off slews of homunculi while Brave Cereza destroys the arc bosses for each dimension. After every multiversal mission, the variants would arrive at Thule and stay together to protect the Chaos Gears while Brave Cereza goes to help and save the next universe and obtain more gears. Have the Bayonettas see the same plot twist we all saw so clearly, even just as players of the game, and have them launch a counterattack on Singularity by trapping him. And have Brave Cereza sacrifice herself in a way that doesn't villainize Viola. If Bayonetta had used teamwork from the beginning, then we wouldn't have had to endure any contrived deaths. No character is being stupid for the sake of the plot moving forward. An actual impact when Brave Cereza dies, instead of Platinum Games trying to gaslight us into believing it was meaningful because she does a pretty dance. Oh yeah, and maybe we all wouldn't be so mad at Viola, who is apparently the character they expect us to want to play as in Bayonetta 4. No, sorry, it doesn't matter how much I liked her before, she literally got Cereza killed. Not cool. But the issues with how Bayonetta 3 betrays the core of its series extend beyond just the story. It even bleeds into how the game treats its players through gameplay. The Bayonetta series' overly positive tone had a uniquely cathartic effect on the player. I can pinpoint exactly why this is. It's the way the game rewards the player for overcoming challenges. In all 3 Bayonetta games, there's a satisfying crunch that comes with pressing the climax command after winning a big fight. Witnessing our summon go absolutely haywire on the enemy and tearing them apart. Through this, Bayonetta herself always remains confident and energetic. It's wonderful. It's one of a kind. In Bayonetta 3, they even extended this feeling by adding entire minigames for Deadly Sin summons. I loved this cherry on top, but it's what proceeds to happen after most climaxes and fights in 3 that is the issue. In Bayonetta 1 and 2, when you win a fight, so does Bayonetta. It makes sense, right? We're controlling the character. We won, she won. The human brain recognizes this, and it releases an adrenaline rush. This is what makes players enjoy games. It's standard logic. Bayonetta can only lose if we, the player, mess up and get her killed. Exceptions to this can exist, but they need to be rare and believable. In Bayonetta 3, however, almost every time you climax or finish a big fight, Bayonetta loses anyways, and oftentimes it results in her or one of her variants dying. Let's take Tokyo Bayonetta for example. We go through a multi-stage fight, with these guys in particular dying in very few hits, and they don't do much damage at all when they hit you. We destroy this huge monstrosity that's been plaguing us for several chapters now, even when we were playing as the Brave Cereza variant. We climax, finish it off, and what happens afterwards? Tokyo Bayonetta dies to one of these tiny enemies that literally takes us 2 seconds to kill in gameplay. This betrays the player because it brings up 2 questions in our minds, and neither of them have satisfying answers. Question number 1 is, what was the point of me fighting that battle then if my character loses anyways? Couldn't the game have just presented this whole sequence in a cutscene? Number 2 is, why did the game just take control away from me only to have my character get killed by an enemy I had zero trouble handling? Just keep control in my hands. We've already proven that she can kill hundreds of these things in a matter of seconds. They die in 2 or 3 hits. I could have prevented this scenario if the game hadn't taken control away from me. And the answer to both of these questions is because the plot demands it. Sorry. Yeah, not satisfying, right? This is but one example in Bayonetta 3 of us playing through a segment, overcoming the challenge, only to witness our character lose the battle anyway, with the end outcome being our Bayonetta variant we've played 90% of the game dying after we win our final victory. It's illogical. It sends the opposite message to the human brain. It tells us we're wasting our time. If everything we did in the game just leads to everyone dying and then our main character dying, why then should we play Bayonetta 3 at all? This makes any other video game sound more satisfying and worthwhile, right? This is bad game design and a great example of how not to treat your player base.
I won't turn my face away. We will come.
Bayonetta, as a series and character, was designed to be overtly feminine. It's something that makes the franchise different from any other, giving it value in that it's an experience you can't find anywhere else. The trait of femininity is particularly intriguing, as most media equates being feminine with villainous or airheaded, oftentimes both. But Bayonetta has always owned her gender identity as entirely female, flashing it in the faces of her enemies. This was especially valuable in the first game, where the main enemies were angels, as they're from the realm most against sexuality and expression. It was always satisfying seeing them react, scramble, and panic in the face of Bayonetta's power and personal integrity. The second game's demonic enemies may not have had the same opposition, but this is where Bayonetta showed her more aggressively sadistic side by just absolutely grinding them to mincemeat with the use of her own demons such as Diomedes and Carnage. In Bayonetta 3, the homunculi not having any personality since they're all extensions of Singularity is interesting, as it renders Bayonetta's taunting almost useless. to the point where Singularity even makes fun of her by making possessed bodies of humans she tried to save dance in her face before she's forced to kill them by dancing to control Gamora. It's a powerful moment, and one that couldn't exist in any other franchise. So then, how bold of Platinum Games to repeatedly kill off our belovedly feminine protagonist several times throughout the game. This is a character who had to overcome so much and found a way to be confident with herself even after surviving years of oppression and war against her kind, all to be insinuatingly replaced by a tomboy. A goofy, clumsy, try-hard tomboy who's into nerdy things like being a ninja and the best Hokage there is. Oh wait, sorry. I almost forgot which character I was talking about here. Yeah, as much as I love Viola, she's such a cardboard cutout of any shonen anime protagonist that I can't help but yawn at the prospect of her taking over the name Bayonetta. Luckily, the voice actress for her is really good, and as much as the game villainizes Viola for Cereza's death, I can't help but feel bad for her because she genuinely seems to care about her parents and saving them. Once again, enforced by the excellent voice acting. However, the role the character fills in the grand scheme of things is only useful as a fun foil to Bayonetta herself. Bayonetta represents the opposite of what most media goes for with protagonists, while Viola represents, well, every protagonist ever. It's a fun juxtaposition served to further enunciate Bayonetta as our titular hero. It's an insult that Platinum Games would even half insinuate the idea that Viola could replace Cereza in Bayonetta 4. Like, guys, you have something good here that no one else has. Don't ruin it. But the lack of focus on Bayonetta as the protagonist doesn't just come from a story standpoint. Once again, it shows up in gameplay. In Bayonetta 1 and 2, Bayonetta and her surroundings were carefully crafted to where she would always have a very strong presence on the screen. The lighting, use of colors, and even her outfits themselves would ensure that she stood out at all times. In Bayonetta 3, it feels like the only way to make Bayonetta stand out in any of the locales is to have her glow in some way. Currently, the only way to get any of the alts to stand out on the screen in most locales is to use pink hair or any other color that glows with the game's lighting engine, which heavily limits the player to an aesthetic purpose and betrays the customization aspect altogether. In her default outfit, which should have been fitted to stand out in every locale just like in the first two games, Bayonetta only stands out while using Demon Slave. This makes her whole body glow, her outfit comes off, and her hair flows wildly to help the player recognize where she is in all the mess. Unfortunately, none of her other outfits have this mechanic when using Demon Slave. This makes it very hard for the player to keep her in sight during the assault. She doesn't even glow, and you'd expect her hairsuits from Bayonetta 1 and 2 to at least come off the same way as 3's, but they don't, betraying the entire point of the first two games' outfits, even though Bayonetta 2 and Smash Ultimate made sure that both outfits always had this mechanic intact. I'm baffled at how much poorer the attention to detail here was from Platinum Games. It's worth noting that Bayonetta's latest default design is just as wonderful as her first two, and just like the first two, it's wonderful for its own reasons. I can't help but feel like a better lighting engine would have gone a long way in making Bayonetta stand out more in these levels. Or if cutscenes have a blur effect that could have been used on the backgrounds to make her a stronger focal point, just like Platinum Games did with Bayonetta 1 and 2. It really feels like Cereza was an afterthought this time around. Her default outfits from 1 and 2 each have accompanying glitches. Bayonetta 1 lags cutscenes visually, creating a desync with the audio that gets heavier the longer she's shown on screen. Bayonetta 2 has a patch on her ass that's missing. It literally looks like she ripped her pants and it's embarrassing. Couple this with their clothes not coming off with Wicked Weaves and Demon Slaves, even when using Scarborough Fair and Love is Blue, you really just feel how much of an afterthought Cereza was. Which leads me to my next point, Demon Masquerade. As cool of a mechanic this is, I feel it's largely overdone. It should have only been included in traversal and ultimate attacks. In Bayonetta 1 and 2, when doing combos and successfully activating Wicked Weaves, Bayonetta's clothes would come off to accentuate that. It was a very strong visual flair that no other game series has, yet again. The best part? It was about Bayonetta. all about her. She was the centerpiece of fights and even spoke to us in celebration if we had a successful pure platinum in battle. In Bayonetta 3, not only does she no longer speak when rewarding pure platinums, but demon masquerades replace her hair clothing mechanic. Her constant transformations lead to a feeling of lost identity. It no longer feels like we're controlling Bayonetta the entire time, it feels like Bayonetta and several other characters. She's no longer the focal point. Her demons are. Even worse is how these masquerade forms take away the shootout mechanic, but that's a whole nother discussion off topic from this video. The point is, Bayonetta 1 and 2 felt unapologetically centered on Bayonetta, the character we're playing. Bayonetta 3 feels scattered by comparison. We're playing as Bayonetta, but she exists in a multiverse, and to confuse us even more, also keeps changing her own form in battle. Is this what an identity crisis looks like? Anyways, I digress. Bayonetta 3 could have been much simpler, and much more successful of an experience for it, but it chose to overcomplicate things, and as a result, most aspects feel contrived or pointless. I hope Platinum Games takes a step back before Bayonetta 4 and evaluate what makes their franchise so special. Really discern what drives players to pick up a Bayonetta game from the shelves over other titles surrounding it. As Bayonetta 3 is likely the best-selling game in the series, I surely hope that this more uniform take on a story doesn't turn new and returning players away from the games to come. I'd like to thank my patrons on Patreon for making this video possible. If you'd like to support me as well, feel free to click the link right here on screen or select any of my other videos listed, such as this one here where I explain exactly what happened in the ending of Bayonetta 3. I've been johtojonny. Enjoy, everyone.